You're listening to the Things of That Nature podcast. Coming to you from Denver, the Mile High City, is me, your host, Rockshana. I invite you to join me for truly honest, passionate, and fun talks that motivate, invigorate, and maybe inspire. When you're ready in the Mile High, the sky's the limit. Everything and anything goes. So let's start talking about things of that nature. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Things of That Nature podcast. I'm your host, Rockshana, and today we get a little spiritual. I have with me Royce Morales, who is a spiritual teacher and healer. Now, if you don't think that's interesting, I think it's interesting. So we're going to talk to Royce today. Hi, Royce. How's it going?
Hi, it's good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to get into the spiritual.
Great.
So where are you as we record this?
Well, I'm in California, kind of southern-ish California. We live in the mountains and it's wonderful today.
Have you always been there?
No, it's always been a dream of mine to live here. And when my husband had a stroke, we just decided to move up to someplace peaceful and beautiful. And like I said, it's always been my goal, and it just sort of manifested. It was amazing. Yeah.
I see. Where were you before?
We were in the South Bay of Southern California, which is near Redondo Beach, that area.
See, I'm a beach and sand girl. Even swimming isn't one of my talents, but I just like the beach and the sand and being really cold in the water and then getting warm all of a sudden. And it's just a good feeling.
It is a good feeling, but the trees kind of make up for that. And we live by a lake. We live by a lake, so we can always get into the water if we need that fix.
Okay. All right. So you have everything around you to make it do.
Yes, definitely.
Neat. And how did you get into this? How did you gain this title of being spiritual teacher and healer?
Well, it all started when I was a little girl, literally, and I just had all these questions, and my poor mother, who was an intellect, like certified genius intellect, couldn't answer my questions. I'd say, well, Mom, what happens after we die? And what is the meaning of life? And all that stuff. And she would just look at me at this, little 4-year-old, and she'd give me these answers that just were pat. And I knew that they were pat, and I knew that they weren't coming from anything other than reciting something that she read somewhere. And it was very frustrating. So when I guess I started my real spiritual search when I was a teenager. I started really looking and jumping into various religions and various personal development classes and philosophy and all that stuff. And I still couldn't find anything that really fed my soul. And I found a few things that, felt good for a while, but then, I would try to live from them. I would try to, base my actions on some of the spiritual truths that I was hearing, and I just couldn't do it. I would leave these wonderful spiritual weekends and I would be flipping people off on the freeway, and it was like, what? Why is this not sticking? And at one point I was involved in a spiritualist, I guess it was, they were training people how to be channelers or mediums, as they called them in those days. And I had, my teacher called me up and said, can you take over the class one night because I need to do something? And I said, sure. And I was terrified, but when I got there, I kind of didn't do much. I just let people talk and share and get to know each other. And at the end of the class, everybody said, oh my gosh, that was the best class I've ever been to, and you should teach. And I'm like, what? And I had one of my fellow students come up to me and say, you really seem like you know a lot of stuff. Would you consider teaching me? And it was one of those moments, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it was a moment where in my head, I was thinking, oh my God, this chick is crazy. There is no way. I don't know anything. What is she talking about? And out of my mouth came, sure, I'd love to bring your friends. And so she did. And I had 10 people in my living room, and I just started talking about stuff, and things would come out of my mouth and that I didn't really know logically, but they would just start coming, and I felt more like I was channeling stuff. And afterwards, they brought their friends, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I've been doing this for decades, almost, I guess almost 4 decades, which is really a bizarre thing. But I kind of just knew at that moment that this is what my entire life had been leading me to, and it all just unfolded. So that's the long story about how it started.
Okay. So were there any like you would go to classes, but was there any moment of hey, be prior to people saying, "Hey, you should start teaching, you should start teaching." Was it just based off of your own research that you were expressing and spreading?
It started out that way, but then, like I said, it just kind of things would come out. People would ask questions, and there was nothing in my own research that gave me the answers, but I would come out with these answers. And they would kind of sit there looking at me in amazement, and I'd be looking at myself in amazement. And they would go home, and I would write stuff down that I'd said, and it's like, wow, gosh, that really makes sense. Okay. So it was just, it really felt like I was a conduit or a catalyst of something that was trying to come out, and the information started to really have profound impact on people's lives. Things would change. Old fears that they were living their life from would resolve, and situations would manifest, and it just became so evident to me that I had something really important that was being given to me. It was my gift that I had to give to people. So, and I used to do, the classes stayed really small for years. And when my husband had a stroke, and we moved up to the mountains, I realized, I can't really do classes up here, but maybe I can do it remotely, which is something I never considered because it was so important that we're all in this little group together. But I started doing remote sessions and remote classes, and it's just been fine. It's worked out just fine. Technology is great.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Before you were doing them remotely, where were you doing them?
I had a center in Redondo Beach that I would have classes in, and it started out in my home, and then I would go to other people's homes, but then eventually it just got too big for that, so I opened a center, and I was there for, 20 years at least.
I see. When you were in younger high school and you're exploring all this realms, what was that like? Like, were you, I'm going to air quote it, can't see my air quotes, but I'm going to air quote it and ask, were you the weird kid?
That's a great question because I tried so hard to not be the weird kid. It was kind of a personal thing with me that I just had all these questions and these needs and these, this depth of concern and questioning going on. And some of my really close friends knew that I was like that, but I really spent a long time covering it up and trying to be normal. I was doing normal teenage things and, craziness that you do as a teenager and in college and all of that. Even so much so that when I married my first husband, I very specifically chose him because he was so normal. He was this, just typical kind of geeky guy that my parents approved of, and everything lasted for about 7 years until I realized, you know what, I can't do this. This is just not being authentic. And we ended up getting a divorce. But yeah, it was all about trying to project some kind of an image of normalcy to the world. It was a great question.
So you're trying to project normalcy into the world, especially when you're younger. It's just making sure you're fitting in and not getting bullied or the weird kid and such. Did you often feel a point where you're just like, I don't feel like I'm being my 100% authentic self?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, looking back at high school and all of that, I was absolutely not being my authentic self. But it was like, okay, it's either not be authentic or be the weird kid and get, laughed at and teased. So I just made that choice. So yeah, and that's one of the things I talk about in my classes, how important it is to be authentic and how you're kind of walking around with a lie, and ultimately it just eats you up inside to be that way. And it's so important to rediscover who that person really is. I've had people that that have taken my classes that realize, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong profession. I knew when I was 10 years old I was supposed to be doing this other thing, and I'm caught in this strange world, and they make life-changing choices because of that. So a lot of the work is about rediscovering the real core of who you are and start to express from that place.
Okay. Well, what's your gain? Like, what's your mission in these classes?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one to answer too. My mission ultimately is discovering who you really are, not by listening to some kind of spiritual cliche and saying, all that stuff that most spiritual disciplines tell you, which is, again, my background. That's what I was told, and it never worked. So I realized that there was something getting in the way, some kind of a fear, some kind of a false programmed notion that I had inside of me. And I try to assist people in getting rid of all of that stuff so that they can be who they really are, and they can function from a place of trust and love and empowerment, so that they're not coming from fear and negative beliefs and the blockages that are programmed in us. And I've developed a way to do that that is very empowering. I call it spiritual cognition integration, which is a lot of big words, but
Mm-hmm.
it's about going inside and discovering moments where you were programmed and where you allowed yourself to be programmed in negative ways, and releasing those programs so that things can shift. And I've had people just have the most remarkable transformation just by discovering that, oh, wow, when I was 2 years old, I decided that I don't deserve love, or, whatever it is. And because of that, they can shift their life. And everything, once you shift from within, this is a very spiritual cliche, but it's true. But once you shift from within, everything else can start to change. You can stop manifesting or attracting certain situations in your life that have been keeping you stuck. So it's very, very empowering.
And then what happens? You help someone reach to that moment,
Mhm.
and do you suggest them keep coming back or change their life?
Well, people automatically do change their life once they realize what's really going on and what's really been holding them back. And it's not just intellectually realizing it, it's experientially realizing it. It's kind of like everything shifts inside of you, so everything can shift external to you. But there's a lot of stuff. We as beings have a lot of stuff going on inside. So excuse me. So it does take a while. Some people things change instantly, and some people it can take quite a while to do the digging. And what I tell people is, to it's kind of my motto. I tell people, when you start doing this work, you're given a shovel and a mirror, and you take that shovel and you keep digging until you find the roots of where some of this stuff started, and you can pull it up, and then you're left with kind of this hole that you can fill with love. It's been filled with fear and anger and negativity all these years, but now it's this open vessel that you can fill with a true sense of deservingness and being who you really are and trusting your life and experiencing true joy. We're kind of walking around in life covering all that up and trying to be happy, and it just doesn't work. Well, at least it didn't work for me. So once you dig down and discover the core and discover the roots, what you are left with is true joy. It's pretty amazing.
Hmm. Now, wouldn't that just be called like a self-discovery?
It's a very deep level of self-discovery. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the spiritual aspect of that? Or
Um,
are they two different things?
yeah, that's a really good question too, because unlike psychology that just, helps you look at your emotions and whatever, this work goes even deeper than that, because what you're looking at is what your spirit is trying to tell you. You're looking at your spiritual lessons or your spiritual gifts or your true purpose for being here on this planet at this